Ani, bonjour, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Gregorini, and as the Director of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce, I'm pleased to welcome everyone here today to the Resource City Resource Championship discussion. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge and recognize that we're in the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory. The land in which we're gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically Garden River and Batchewana First Nations. Our city, Sault Ste. Marie, was originally known by First Nations as Bawadi. Both names refer to the rapids of the St. Mary's River right outside, just one of this area's natural resources. Our meeting today is all about creating economic prosperity through leveraging our natural resources. In Ontario in 2017, mining and mineral production was valued at $10 billion. The industry's service and supply sector had an additional impact of $6.6 billion, which included my company, Norpro. Norpro provides security, IT, health and safety solutions to many mines and other clients. Being part of the natural resource sector has allowed Norpro to create more than 130 jobs in the last 5 years. For today's Resource City Resource Champion discussion, I'd like to acknowledge all elected officials, city staff, chamber board members, past presidents, and the chamber staff, and the panelists that have gathered today. And last but not least, I'd like to call upon my friend Don Mitchell to speak. Don is a very active community member and volunteer with too many accomplishments to list. He's going to speak to us as the president of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. Don.
Thank you, Brad. I've got to put the mic down. Brad's a little taller than I am. I'm a little wider. He's just a little taller. In 2015, Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce partnered with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to have a community recognized as a resource city. Canada's cities and communities are places where natural resources are transformed into the engines of our economy. They create supply chains that impact every citizen. This morning, Terry Sheehan announced at Tenaris a commitment to support of $36 million.
Hear, hear.
The investment in the modernization of Tenaris and its continued presence here in Sault Ste. Marie. For every job created in the steel manufacturing center, approximately 3 to 4 additional jobs are created for the supply chain. We have a tendency to forget that 90% of all economic growth comes from within our own communities. This is proven today with 90 new major industrial jobs, adding at a minimum 3 to 4 to 1 for a total of another 270 jobs. My arithmetic, which is basic today, and I don't need my iPhone to tell me, is 360 jobs in Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you, government. Terry. Tenaris' commitment to Canadian resource development and jobs in Sault Ste. Marie is welcome news, especially after the problems we've had with trade tariffs and on-market economy goods entering into North America. And with that, I pass the torch to the man who's carried it very well for the steel industry here in Sault Ste. Marie, Terry Sheehan.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Don, for that acknowledgement. The steel industry is tremendously important to this community and to all of Canada. And it was after I got elected in 2015, I hadn't even been sworn in yet, and had a call from the Chamber of Commerce and Tenaris welcoming me to attend a tour of Tenaris and to a discussion about Sault Ste. Marie being a resource city. And it was a really great opportunity to hit the ground running. And at that particular time, Don is right, dumping was a major issue. It was a huge issue. It was Tenaris, Algoma Steel, the unions, the industry that came forward and said, we need to modernize our trade remedy system. And there were a number of suggestions that were brought forward. And I was very pleased to listen, to learn. And then a couple of weeks later, Algoma Steel had went into receivership, CCAA. And I can tell you that I'm extremely pleased and honored to mention that it was the Northern Ontario Liberal Caucus that I brought this to right away about the emergency of steel, not only in Sault Ste. Marie, but Canada. And we took that as our #1 top priority, first meeting. We meet once a week in Ottawa to discuss issues. With my Northern Ontario colleagues, and some of them are here today, we're going to be doing a weekend Northern Ontario retreat. We have Paul LaFog from Sudbury, Anthony Rhoda from North Bay, and of course Bill Blair. But we'll get to that in a second. We adopted that as our #1 priority, and then we took it to the Ontario Caucus where Bill Blair and a bunch of Ontario people sit, and we took it as our top priority. Steel will be our top priority. We then met with the National Caucus, 180 plus of us, and it was there we decided that it would be a top priority for this government for this term. So year after year, budget after budget, we continued to make changes to and modernize the trade remedy system. In black and white, that has strengthened us and created one of the best trade regimes. You know why we got there? Is because we listened to the steel industry, and we listened to the unions, and they told us what we needed to develop the resources. After that, we ended up also resourcing and putting money at the borders into investigating and stopping dumping. Fast forward, lo and behold, the American administration put 232 tariffs on the world, and Canada was hit with them as well. And it was here where the Prime Minister coined the phrase, "I've got your backs." And you'll recall, when we were hit with those tariffs, we came up with $2 billion in support for the steel and aluminum industry. And as a result, fast forward to today, Tenaris had put forward an application a number of months ago, and we lobbied and worked hard to put that forward. And so I was pleased, Don, that we were able to put forward some more support for the local steel industry, bringing the total to about $106 million, which is supporting the industry that's so great. But lo and behold, we have allies too, upstream and downstream. It's our oil and gas industry that are our allies in steel. It's mining that's our allies in steel. It is the auto manufacturing. It is the manufacturing in general that are our allies. And the interplay and interfluence that we have created has really brought forward and helped turn the economy around in Canada. 1 million jobs have been created. 1 million jobs have been created since we were elected. That's a pretty amazing number. But that's because we've all been working together. And even if we faced adversity, we were able to put forward a Team Canada approach, and we were able to get it done. So I thank each and every single one of you in this room that have played a vital role in bringing us together as we move forward. So I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion, a continuation of what we are doing, and we're all ears as well. And Brad, thank you very much for emceeing the event. I know that you've been a participant at the Fedor-sponsored pavilion down in Toronto, which is probably one of the largest, we're going to qualify the PA for natural resources, the largest pavilion there. And if you ever want to see somebody work a floor, Brad is really good at it. Congratulations. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Anthony Rhoda from North Bay up. He is the Assistant Deputy Speaker for the House of Commons to do an introduction for the Honourable Bill Blair.
Good afternoon. Bonjour, Ani, Anthony Rhoda, Nishnika, It's a pleasure to be here. C'est un plaisir d'être ici parmi vous pour célébrer et discuter ce qui se passe dans le nord de l'Ontario. It's great to be here, to be able to discuss what's going on in Northern Ontario. And talking about the supply chain is probably one of the most important things that gets ignored too often. I know I often talk to people who are starting business. I've had businesses in the past, and one of the big things, worse than not having enough customers, is having too many customers that you can't supply to. And that's something that startups really run into, mainly because somebody's not paying them, but sometimes your raw resources can't make it. So one of the first questions I ask is, where are you getting your raw resources from, or your base product? And that's something that we all have to pay attention to. And it's nice to see it developed on a larger scale right through Northern Ontario, because it's very important to all of us to understand that chain and know how we can encourage it to grow and create more jobs in Northern Ontario so that our businesses can keep pumping out product and creating jobs as we get into an economy that is more and more challenging and more globalized. If we can keep those supply chains as close to the plant as possible, it really does guarantee that much better success of the company in question. So I was asked to introduce someone who probably doesn't need an introduction. And right now, he's the MP for Scarborough Southwest. Many of you know this person as the Chief of Police, which for Toronto, which he covered for about 10 years after, in total 30 years in the police service in Toronto, and very vocal, very good at getting people motivated, and he continues to do that in Parliament. Now, he served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice, and now he is the Minister of Border Security and Crime Organization. Now, he's not the Minister of Crime Organization. He's against that. I just want to clarify for everyone that he's not pushing that as something that would be good for Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honourable Bill Blair.
I thought it best to use the stairs because of my titanium knees. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to have the opportunity, first of all, to visit the Soo. About a week and a half ago, Terry called me and said, we're making one of the most important announcements in the Soo for this government. And he says, I need you to be here. And I will tell you, many of you have probably already learned this. It's hard to say no to Terry Sheehan. And so I was very pleased to have the opportunity to come up here, because when I found out what we were going to be talking about, frankly, it's what we have been talking about, as Terry's indicated, right from the first moment that we formed government. And I will also tell you something that I suspect you already know. You have an incredible advocate for the Soo in your member of Parliament representing the Soo. He talks about the Soo relentlessly. Those of us who have the privilege of working with him probably know as much about his town as just about anybody in Canada, and it's because of his unwavering commitment to this community. I also know, by the way, as I mentioned, I'm a former cop, and probably the most dangerous place a cop can stand is between you and your lunch. So I'll try to be brief. Terry mentioned some of the challenges that we as a nation have faced in our all-important critical resource sector and manufacturing industries, with some of the challenges in trade. It's been an enormous commitment of our government to get this right. I have to tell you, I'm proud of what we've achieved. We haven't, not perfectly, but we have made enormous progress. Canada is now the only G7 country in the world that actually has a trade agreement with every other G7 country. We now have access to over $1 trillion in trade each year as a result of the hard work that we've done. And the finalization of the North American Free Trade Agreement, version 2.0, was not an easy task, as many of you are aware. And we faced a number of challenges, not the least of which, and probably the most challenging of which, was the 232 tariffs that were imposed upon us. And so we, from the very outset, stood up to those tariffs. We imposed retaliatory tariffs, and some people disagreed with that, but we felt it was important to stand up for Canadians, stand up for Canadian industry, stand up for Canadian workers, and it worked. We stood strong, and I will tell you, Terry also mentioned about the Team Canada approach. all of us who do work in the United States, and part of my responsibilities takes me to Washington and to New York and other places. And with every single American legislator we met with their chambers of commerce, with their governors, with people who are interested in the trade between our countries, we raised the issue of our manufacturers, our steel industry, and the unfairness for both countries of those 232 tariffs, and they were lifted. We are also very grateful, and today when I went to Tenaris is one of those strong partners, a committed industry, a corporate partner, who is prepared to invest in their industry in Canada, to improve their production capabilities, to reduce their environmental footprint, to maintain and to grow good Canadian jobs and great Canadian industries. And we're very proud to have the opportunity to be a partner with them, but not just a partner with Corporate Canada, but a partner with you. And because, as was earlier said, those jobs that are being created at Tenaris, 90 new additional jobs, plus sustaining over 500 jobs that currently exist in that plant, but it has another impact because of the work that you all do in supporting your community. And so we recognize the importance of communities. I will also tell you, and as I sort of come to the end watching your lunch come out, I'm the Minister of Border Security. My responsibility is to maintain secure borders. But a greater responsibility, or at least as great a responsibility within that mandate, is to maintain an open border between our two countries. That bridge that connects Sault Ste. Marie with the United States is an important point of trade between our two countries. And we recognize the importance of keeping our markets open for Canadian industries, Canadian manufacturers to the world. And we're working hard to maintain that. We're very grateful for the support that we have received. The partnership that exists between ourselves and our communities, our workers, our unions, trade manufacturers, and the resource sector. The work that you are doing here will have an impact across the country. It is an expression of confidence for the future that I'm sure will be heard in Alberta, in Calgary, in the energy sector. And it's important to all Canadians that we all prosper together. And so I thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today and to celebrate a renewed commitment to our growth and our prosperity. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Terry. Much appreciated. And now, as Bill said, it is time to get back and let you all eat, and we'll come back to the program after that. Thank you all. Enjoy.
I'd like to bring up Guillermo Moreno to come speak. Guillermo is an industrial engineer by education, born and raised in Argentina, but has also worked in several countries, Argentina, Mexico, United States, and Canada. So he has been after coming. And Guillermo has been with us now, working in Canada for over 7 years. And so his credibility of doing what he says, saying what he does, we appreciate as colleagues and enjoy working for him. Appreciate everything that he has done. We aren't that vocal in the community, but I hope we're consistent. And so I bring up Guillermo Moreno, the president of Tenaris. And before we allow Guillermo to talk, everyone loves a video, right? No. Everyone loves a video. And so here is a video of the Tenaris identity in Canada. Thank you to Guillermo for helping us build that identity.
Up here, where the wilderness is vast, the air is cool, and the people are warm.
I'm always prepared to speak with those PowerPoint slides, just in case.
It has been a story event so far, but we haven't had any luck with the videos. So we had some delay this morning and see that we are having the game. So we're gonna modify the agenda. We will listen to Guillermo, really, and then he will conclude with this fantastic video.
But they will tell you what they felt. I like that.
Thank you, Dave, and
Use that to
thank you everybody for being here today.
cite
I'm very pleased to be sharing this event, this stage with different members of the three levels of our government, industry leaders, community leaders, business leaders. Well, you heard about what we announced this morning. This is a very happy day for Tenaris, for the Tenaris family, particularly here in Canada. A very, very emotional day for me as well. This $36 million investment is going to allow us to expand our manufacturing capabilities here in the zoo. With these new capabilities, we'll be able to produce products that we were not able to produce before, and that are needed by our clients, the oil and gas industry, that has challenges that evolve in all the time, and every year they need to face new challenges. So this investment is going to allow us to produce products with premium connections, new steel sour service grades, new outside diameters. So we are very pleased to be able to expand these capabilities. This investment would have not been possible without the support from the federal government, Terry Sheehan in particular. So thank you very much for your support, for understanding some of the difficulties the steel industry went through during the last years, but also those that were supplying the energy sector. So thank you very much. This investment is going to mean new jobs. It was already mentioned, so I am not surprising anybody that this will mean another 90 jobs, direct jobs in our plant in Sault Ste. Marie, but we'll have a multiplying effect, 3, 4, some people say even 5 in the community where we operate. So we are very, very happy for that. But I'm also very happy today because of this event. As Dave said, I'm an industrial engineer, and I worked all my career in Tenaris, 32 years in Tenaris, in different places. And all my career I've been very passionate about manufacturing. And I've been very passionate about how you connect the development of resources with local supply chains. And as Dave said, working in different countries, but also being responsible for global operations and dealing with almost every single country in the world where oil and gas is produced, I've seen that countries take different approaches to the development of those resources. I don't need to tell you how blessed we are in Canada for the vast research of resources we have of different types, particularly in oil and gas, with the third largest oil reserves in the world and the fifth largest natural gas. But not every country is developing those resources with the same approach. Here in Canada, we are also very fortunate of having a leading oil and gas industry that is committed to the highest standards in terms of health, safety, and environment, but also committed to a very responsible development of those developments. But where I've seen the biggest difference, and this is what my passion is what countries do about what's coming. How do you supply this industry? How do you develop those resources? Do you just care about the domestic supply chain? We care or not, and that's what makes the difference. And this is what we are going discussing today, is this connection between the development of resources and a local supply chain and the domestic manufacturing that makes the development of those resources become into prosperity and an engine for the economy of every corner of a country like Canada. Tenaris is the best example of this. The investment that we announced today is the best example of this. We have the resources, we have the industry, we have the clients. They tell us what their needs, and we, by being local and understand their needs, we are committed to them, and we go with investment. Investment like this one, where we are investing in facilities, but also investment in research and development to make sure that we can provide them with the latest technology that they need, because they are going deeper and deeper, they are going longer and longer, and they need today products that they were not needing
5 or 10 years ago. When we arrived in Canada and here in the zoo almost 20 years ago, the products that were needed were more simple than the ones that are needed today. And our focus and our understanding was Canada was about to develop the oil sands, something very unique to Canada. So by being a local producer, we understand those needs and we developed the connections and the skills that were not available anywhere in the world because this was something completely different. The SACD, the thermal operations, were very unique to Canada. And by being here, we could do that. And then the industry continued evolving, and then we went through a big crisis in 2015 and 2016. And again, there, by being here, we understood that our client needed something else, something different. Probably here now the innovation was not on product, but was on service. It was on helping them reduce their total cost of operation. And this is why, this time, understanding their needs, by being local again, we brought what we call the direct model. This is where we connect our industrial facilities, our production programs, with their drilling schedules. So in order to shorten the lead times, in order to reduce inefficiencies in the total supply chain, in order to reduce the total working capital, because money and cash availability was not the same now in crisis time that it used to be before. And with this, we came with a solution that has been very successful and we are very proud of, and it's what we call the direct model. And then the share scale, and this is a very much North American thing, but now it's going to other locations, and new products and new steel blades were needed. And this investment is about this, it's about the ability to produce premium connections that will be needed for the shales guys, development, steel grades, sour cells particularly that are needed in areas like Montney and Duvernay, and outside diameters that were not needed before, because by working together with our clients, again, and understanding their needs, we came to the conclusion that there were opportunities for redesigning their wells to make them more efficient. So new outside diameters were needed, and this is what we are doing now, investing here. I can talk all day about this, because how we are interconnected, right? So we have the resources, we develop a strong oil and gas industry. Strong oil and gas industry needs a very strong domestic supply chain. We need the business from them, but also they need us to be able to help them get and face the challenge they have to face. And also we need the people, we need the talent, we need communities like Sault Ste. Marie. And here we are also investing. We will keep investing in developing the talent that is needed. Tenaris is very focused on education. Every year we are investing more or less $300,000 in supporting education, particularly STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This is our commitment to make sure that we as Tenaris will have in the future the talent that we need, but also other industries as needed. So I see Canada able that during the years have been able to develop this domestic supply chain and has been able to connect these resources with manufacturing. But I have to be honest with you, I don't think that we are going into the highest potential. I still, when I travel around Canada, I see people in Eastern Canada or Central Canada don't realize how important the development of the resources in Western Canada oil and gas are. But also when I'm in Western Canada, because I live in Calgary, sometimes I see people that don't care about whether those products are produced and the impact that it can have in different communities all across Canada. And by having the panel that we have today, that is incredible, this is what I would like to hear from you. How do you see this, and what else we can do? All of us, the government, the clients, the industry, the community leaders, what else we can do to make sure that we all understand how value is created, how prosperity is created because of the responsible development of those resources, connected and supplied by a very strong domestic supply chain. So I really look forward to hearing from you. I expect that after today, we will all have a small agenda and we will be able to go out and be a little bit more vocal about how important it is to develop those resources how important it is to connect the development of those resources with a very strong Canadian supply chain. Thank you very much.
Up here, where the wilderness is vast, the air is cool, the people are warm. This is Canada. This is where we work. Sure, we're nice people. Just don't mistake our Canadian kindness for complacency. The one thing we'll never be apologetic for is the way we roll up our sleeves and get the job done. At Tenaris, our spirit is Canadian, but our reach is global. Our technologies are innovative, and our expertise worldly. But to work this land, you have to respect it. That's why everything we do empowers operators, delivering the next generation of energy so the next generation of Canadians can enjoy the beauty of this land as much as we do. Up here, on demand, isn't just some buzzword. It's a code we live by, a relentless drive to deliver the right product to the right place at the right time. We always go the extra kilometer, so you can too. Supporting your project from our mill to your well, every step of the way. That's our Canadian work ethic, and it's served us well for over 50 years. Tenaris, up here, we go the extra kilometer.
So that's part of our identity, connecting our clients in the energy sector with our manufacturing here in Sault Ste. Marie. Beautiful geography across the country. It makes us proud. Speaking of making us proud, we have a fantastic panel. We're going to hear from unique perspectives from each of them, beginning first with the Chamber of Commerce. They're part of this Resource Champions Initiative. Thank you to the Sault Chamber of Commerce and the National Chamber Network. And we're going to hear from Perrin Beatty, who wasn't able to join us here today. He has a doctor's appointment, but he's participating by video.
Canada is a resource nation. Our history, our present, and our future are closely entwined with its forests, minerals, oil, and gas that form our collective national economy.
It's different. Resources Champions is a program that was put together by the FCM, it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So they have cities and municipalities across the country that say we're supportive. So yeah, so it's actually a good idea. And in Quebec, the city where they had the last AGM. Oh, you were there? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, so you would know that. Yeah, you know what?
What a great family that is.
So that's the city calendar. And this is what they presented in Quebec. But there's so the Alberta Union, the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, AUMA, Gary Morishito was the one that had sort of connected all of the resource communities to try and tie that all in together when they went to Quebec. So not only the ones in Alberta, but the ones more accurate for, for example.
Okay, we're going to use the audio. We saw what Perrin looked like.
National endowment. We sometimes forget this important reality. We lose sight of the vital resource supply chains that stretch across our country, binding our communities, our cities, and our people together. They're an important part of our national fabric. Now, there are many players in these resource supply lines, including manufacturers, high-tech firms, and service providers. The connection between our energy sector and the steel manufacturing supply chain is perhaps one of our strongest economic engines. Companies like Tenaris and Algoma Steel provide steel pipes for oil and natural gas drilling and for pipelines. They also provide power generation materials to build gas plants and water treatment facilities, and steel plates for wind farms, boilers, and the sawmills that support our forestry sector. This resource supply chain provides incredible opportunities for Canadians. The steel manufacturing industry in Canada directly employs 22,000 people, and for each person employed by the sector, an additional 3 jobs are created. From the 450 chambers of commerce across this country, we know the importance to regional economies, and our friends and colleagues at the Sioux Chamber live it every day. This value chain is what links mining champions like Noront to our energy sector. For instance, the ferrochrome created in refineries like those announced by Noront is made into new products by Algoma Steel that are in turn sold to support the Prince Wind Farm in Northern Ontario, or the 7 generations innovative drilling measures in Alberta. These links not only foster economic growth and create good jobs here at home, but they also allow Canada to build a value chain that's green and low emitting. Canadian Steel supports the energy sector and helps us to create a more diverse portfolio of energy sources. At the very same time, our steel industry is consistently one of the lowest emitting anywhere in the world. Now, a good example of this is Tenaris, which has reduced its electricity consumption per ton of product by 22% over the past 15 years. In 2009, it launched a CO2 emissions and energy saving plan that was awarded a climate action certificate for its efforts. And we need look no further than Sault Ste. Marie's solar park to understand the importance of supply chains, even those that cross borders, for Canada's path to a lower carbon economy. This value chain can also help us meet the demands of industrializing nations globally with low carbon Canadian commodities. In short, the competitiveness of our resource supply chain is key to making Canada's transition to the low carbon economy both swift and prosperous. Our resource supply chains drive our economy. Unfortunately, however, they don't drive the national conversation about our resource sector. Canada's business community needs to ensure that Canadians can see not only how our resources move their way, but also how investment in the sector in one part of the country creates opportunities everywhere. That's why the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has launched its Resources of the Future campaign. This campaign aims to encourage Canadians to be proud of their resources by telling stories that highlight our resource sector as a place of innovation, sustainability, and shared prosperity. We'll continue to work with Tenaris and other resource champions to further this dialogue. Canada's future and Sault Ste. Marie's future depend on it. Sincere congratulations on this happy day to Tenaris, supported by the good work of Rory and his team at the Sioux Chamber of Commerce, and of course to all of the community of Sault Ste. Marie. We hope there will be many more days like this yet to come.
Okay. So from the broad Canadian Chamber perspective, we'd like to hear more from the energy, the oil and gas perspective. And so I'd like to call up Shannon Joseph from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Shannon is Vice President of Government Relations. She has a master's in civil engineering, and she is going to share with us the opportunity that the oil and gas sector presents.
I have a PowerPoint. I don't know if it's going to come up right away, but I'll just get started. So thank you very much, first of all, to the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce for hosting this wonderful event. It was a pleasure to be present this morning for Tenaris's very positive announcement. And I'm honored to be here among such distinguished guests to be part of this policy conversation about Canada and its resource sector. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers represents Canada's upstream oil and gas industry. My members have operations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland in the offshore, but we have resources in all of the places you see here. We are an important engine of Canada's economy. We are the #1 export of Canada, representing 22% of all exports. We are the largest source of capital investment in Canada. In 2017, we were at $41 billion in the year. This has gone down slightly in 2018, but still a major driver. And we are part of a national supply chain that employs over 500,000 talented women and men across the country, including over 60,000 here in Ontario. My members are major customers of Canadian Steel and of world-class products that are produced by Ontario's manufacturing sector. And this reminds me all the time that the oil and gas industry doesn't belong to just one part of Canada. It is a national project. It is connected to Canadian innovation and industry across the country, and this is something we should all be proud of. Canada, as has been mentioned, is blessed with many good things, including this abundant supply of energy, as well as the talent and the know-how to develop that energy safely and continually shrinking our environmental footprint. And that is a very good thing because demand for our energy resources, the things we produce here in Canada, is growing around the world, and it's growing here in Canada. If we look internationally, according to the International Energy Agency that produced this data, energy demand is going to be growing globally everywhere in the world, driven primarily by demand in Asia. This is both a population growth thing, but it's also about people raising their standards of living. There's an incredible story going on around the world of more and more people coming out of energy scarcity and out of energy poverty. And going out to 2040, the energy that's going to drive that improvement in people's quality of life is over 50% of it is going to come from oil and gas. And Canada, because of the way we do things, the way we produce things, should be the supplier of choice for that energy around the world, out into the future that we can see here, even as renewables and even as all other forms of energy continue to expand. Here in Canada, Canadian oil and gas can play a critical role in providing lower emission, affordable energy to Canadian citizens and to Canadian businesses. And we can look no further than Tenaris. My members help provide Tenaris with the energy it needs to drive its growth, creating opportunities here in Sault Ste. Marie. When Tenaris succeeds, and today's announcement was certainly a success and sign of success, the energy sector also succeeds. And it works the other way. When the energy sector succeeds, so too do firms like Tenaris, who is a major supplier of pipe for our industry, but as well as 1,100 other firms across Ontario. Others are going to speak more about the manufacturing connection between the energy sector and Ontario. But the Tenaris example showcases that we don't just produce things for each other. We help drive each other towards innovation and towards success. And I'd like to close by just talking about some of those examples of innovation for our sectors and some of those examples of opportunity. In the environmental sector, Canadian energy producers, oil and gas producers, are committed to the highest standards of air, water, and land protection. My members have formed all kinds of initiatives, spending billions of dollars, $1.4 billion, to develop over 1,000 technologies that are all about innovation, leadership, and those technologies can be applied to industries across Canada. In terms of our own operations, in the last 10 years, we've reduced our emissions intensity by 21%. And as more investment comes into Canada and we can build out these new types of operations, that emissions profile continues to go down. And this better emissions profiled energy, better emissions profiled oil and gas can supply the world. I want to show this graph too, because it shows you a breakdown of the GHG emissions generated by countries around the world. You see Canada there, 1.5%. And certainly we, as a contributor to that amount, are committed, again, to reducing our footprint. But it's important for us to also keep in mind the LNG opportunity in Canada, which has the potential to make a major dent in that 24% provided by China, and the major dent that is being grown in India right now, both on the air quality side and on the GHG emission side. Canada can make an oversized contribution to GHG emissions reduction globally through the development of our LNG, and our entire supply chain in Canada can be a part of it. I'll add one last area of innovation that we can see more of as our industries succeed, and that's in social innovation. The oil and gas sector is one of the largest employers of Indigenous Canadians. We have a $1.8 billion annual supply chain, procurement with Indigenous-owned businesses, with over 400 businesses in Alberta alone. And we see an important role for industry in economic reconciliation, in creating opportunities and transforming lives for Indigenous business owners and their communities. And again, we can have more of that as our industries succeed. So I guess I'll end by saying the best is yet to come, and through dialogues like this, we can really work together to build the kind of innovation and investment environment Canada needs to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, that was fantastic. The best is yet to come. Next, I'd like to bring up Gary Marr. Gary is the president and CEO of the Petroleum Services Association of Canada. Gary is a lawyer and has a finance degree. He has represented the Alberta government in Asia, in Beijing, and in Washington. He has a long career, and in the last year, he's now joined the Petroleum Services Association of Canada, and Gary will share with us a little bit more of how this is connected.
Thanks, Dave. Look, I want to say first of all what I learned when I was at the plant this morning. And Honourable Minister, members of Parliament, let me say that this was a great experience for me. Your worship, you were there this morning as well. And I want to direct this to Cody over there. Cody, the first guy that I met at the plant was Eugene. And I met with Eugene, and I talked to him, and I talked to guys like Wade, and I talked to guys that are on the floor of this remarkable facility. And I will tell you that there were 3 or 4 takeaways that I had from that experience. And that is that Tenaris is committed to making things better when it comes to occupational health and safety, to labor, to technology, to the environment and innovation. And this is exactly the reason why the Petroleum Services Association of Canada, we strive to do the same things. And I'm going to make a bold statement here that Canada is the most responsibly produced energy producer in the world. And it doesn't matter if you measure that through an environmental framework or an occupational health and safety framework or a labor standards framework. Our guys go to work efficiently and effectively bringing energy out of the ground every single day, and they come home safely. Just exactly the same way that Wayne talked to me about it, that Eugene talked to me about it. Give yourselves a hand for the kind of work that you do. So what Shannon was talking about was really the exploration and production side, that the petroleum services sector, all the upstream guys that do the energy services. We can see that there's been a large number of jobs that have been created in this area, and there's a lot of different descriptions. It ranges from fracking to mechanics to technologists, swampers, millwright snubbers, seismic services. We do a lot of different jobs, and you can see the jobs as they're created across the country, which includes, as Shannon indicated, about almost 65,000 jobs right here in the province of Ontario. You can see that the demand, as Shannon talked about, the demand for energy is going to increase, and that's because the world's going from 7 to 10 billion people by 2100. And you can see that in spite of the growth of things like renewables, the reality is that fossil fuels are going to continue to provide the largest share of the energy mix for the world. And because we have the most responsibly produced energy on the face of the earth, it should be the oil and the gas of choice anywhere in the world. And if we stop producing it, if we can't get it to market, if we can't have pipelines to take our oil and gas to markets other than the United States, it will be displaced by people who don't operate with the same kind of faith in technology and environment and occupational health and safety. So we must continue to have and build out more takeaway capacity. And Minister, your colleagues, you and your colleagues, we really appreciate the approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And we need to have more of that takeaway capacity, because what's good for the oil and gas business will be good for Tenaris. Technology's changed a lot over the years. You can see this older drill rig here is actually made out of wooden scaffolding. This, on the other hand, is a drill rig that actually it moves itself. It's got these feet that are on it that move along this route, and they're able to do a lot of drilling with that. So, and this is something that you can actually control your drill rig from an office in Calgary, and it may be operating a drill that's hundreds or even thousands of miles away. It's really a remarkable technology, and this is, we used to drill wells just straight into the ground or verticals. Now we can do horizontal drills, and those drills can go out 5 to 8 kilometers from the drill site. From 8 kilometers away, we can hit a target in the drill zone that's about the size of a pane of glass. It's incredibly accurate, and that technology is now being deployed in areas like surgery. So we have these devices in surgical suites that are developed from the oil and gas business, where we are now able to do surgery using the same kind of technology. If we care about global emissions, we should care about where our oil and gas comes from. And it always surprises me when people talk about the importance of their cup of coffee. We want to make sure that we have fair trade coffee, that we care that the environment's not being desecrated, that people are being paid a fair wage. We want fair trade coffee. Well, I would make the argument we should also be equally concerned about where a tank of gasoline comes from. So if you're concerned about your coffee, you should also be concerned about where your oil and gas comes from, because it's going to continue to be developed, and Canada should be supplying the world with what we produce. We're a huge producer of natural gas. We have the 3rd largest proven reserves of oil in the world, and we are an energy superpower, if only we have the ability to get our product to market. And I would make this argument that if we really wanted to do something for the global emissions of GHGs in the world, we need to count carbon the right way. GHG emissions don't respect geopolitical boundaries. There's no such thing as a Canadian atmosphere. There's only one global atmosphere. And if all we did was move natural gas to help gasify China and take them off of coal, we would be doing more for reducing the overall global emissions in the world than if we stopped every automobile in all of Canada. That is a claim that I will make. And it is remarkable. Here in Canada, this is an interesting stat. Here in Canada, and we were meeting with some people from Minister Rickford's office in Northern Ontario. They're well aware that about 15% of Canadians still get their primary energy and heating from using wood. That is a huge contributor to global gas emissions. This is an image of burning of dung that's in India, and it creates an incredible, huge footprint. And again, if we displace this with natural gas, the world would be better. Now, this is an interesting chart. When you ask most people in Canada, what's our biggest export? Many of them will tell you it's motor vehicles and parts. In fact, 25% of Canada's exports come in the form of crude oil, natural gas, and bitumen. And that doesn't actually include the services that we export for the development of energy in other parts of the world, and especially in the United States. So a quarter of our exports come from oil and gas. And so that is a significant part of the equation as to why the standard of living in Canada is so good, is because of the exports of oil and gas from this country. have challenges with respect to getting our material abroad. We know that there are some headwinds that have happened outside of the control of any government, provincial or federal. We can't control the supply that's coming out of the Middle East. We cannot control slowing demand in places like China. But here's what's happened. There's been a dramatic reduction in capital investment in the energy sector from 2014 to 2018, roughly half, $81 billion to $41 billion. And that, of course, has had a big impact on the job situation, which has gone from 883,000 to 533,000. So it is really important for the future prosperity of our nation to understand that we are an energy superpower and that we must take advantage of that. So that's all I've got to say. I'll be happy to sit in the panel here with Shannon and others, but I appreciate the time and I really had a great time here in Sioux. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Gary. So from big picture petroleum producers to those workers that are helping to bring it to the ground and to markets. Now we're going to go into something that many of you already have some familiarity with, but I guarantee you haven't heard it from Catherine Compton, the CEO and president of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Catherine has been working in the resource sector for almost her entire career, working in forest products, and now we are extremely proud to have her working in steel. Catherine.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much to the Chamber for hosting such a critical conversation today. Very, very pleased for the steel sector to be part of it. I'd like to congratulate Tenaris on the incredible journey that you are on in terms of transformation and the step today in terms of the announcement. We at the Canadian Steel Producers Association are very proud of what you are accomplishing. I would be very remiss if I didn't take a moment to reflect on, in this room, we have an incredible representation of the Team Canada that moved mountains and performed, frankly, miracles to get the 232 tariffs lifted off of the steel industry in Canada. I just think we should acknowledge the hard work of the local representation in Terry, the Steel Caucus itself, the Northern Ontario Caucus, the Ontario Caucus, the Canada-US Cabinet Committee. Minister, thank you very much. The role of the municipalities, of the mayor, and the mayor's here somewhere. There you are, thank you again. The unions, the producers and the unions worked tirelessly together, and we really appreciated that your efforts and the opportunity to work with you. And I think what we've done together is really accomplished something extraordinary. So it's been a couple months now, and it's still very fresh in my mind that by working together, we were able to do something truly that the entire world has not been able to do. And that we got there by working hard and the love and commitment. So thank you very much. I know many of you. So I'm here today to talk to you about the steel sector, and it's my new sector. I'm 6 months into the job, and I am fascinated and in love with this sector. We are not only a consumer of natural resources, we use energy, of course. You saw, for those of you who saw the tour today, we use important mining products in the form of, for example, metallurgical coal and iron ore. But more than that, we also, and the purpose of today's discussion is we really enable the natural resource development downstream and in other aspects of the Canadian economy. So it's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you about that today. Just a little bit about who we are, some of the facts and the figures, if you will. We're a $15 billion industry in this country. We make 14 billion tons of steel, pipe, and tubular products in 19 facilities in 5 provinces, from Alberta through to Quebec. I'd like to point out the importance of Sault Ste. Marie on this map with two important and very significant steel operations in this community. And as you can see, we are a significant employer in this region, and we are in many regions across the country, 23,000 direct employees and an additional 100 in terms of the multiplier. We view ourselves very much as an economic engine of our economy, of our country. We build growth in the communities, and there was no better example than what we saw at the Tenaris plant today. We build growth across our country and certainly throughout North America. Steel is in about 70%, it's everywhere, it's in about 70% of all manufactured materials. We are a critical supplier, of course, to the energy sector. We've been discussing that already. We are so proud to be serving the responsible extraction of those products in this country, as well as providing them with the infrastructure, helping with the infrastructure of those facilities, all of the different aspects, and including renewables as well. Other sectors that we're deeply involved in would include the automotive sector, other forms of transportation, the construction sector, etc. So I think you can see this is part of why, while we're maybe a smaller sector than some of the others we're hearing from today, we have tremendous support from our communities and from our governments. We punch above our weight in terms of the strategic importance we play in the economy. We're also very technologically driven. A number of you got to see that in action today. That was an incredible sight to see in terms of the amount of high tech, the artificial intelligence, the robotics, etc. I hope you all get a chance to witness that in action. It's a true experience. So we, I believe, are one of Canada's leading examples of what we love to refer to as advanced manufacturing. We talk about the knowledge economy in Canada, but we sometimes forget that we're actually applying it in core industries like the Canadian steel sector. And of course, the type of strategic investment that was announced today is absolutely critical for maintaining that momentum and our competitive advantages. I wanted to also highlight that as we're transitioning to a low carbon economy throughout the world, and certainly as we're doing that in Canada, the Canadian steel sector recognizes how important this is. We know that it's important not only to ourselves, not only to our governments, but also very important to our marketplace. We are a willing partner in addressing greenhouse gas emissions and lowering carbon footprints. I think it's really important to note that we've done a significant amount of work on this already, but that to go further, I think we would benefit greatly from more collaboration, more mutual innovation to really do the step changes necessary to further that agenda. Another issue, and this came up a little bit today, that we're very proud of on our green credentials is the degree of recycling that's going on in this country of steel products. We, first and foremost, we work with the material that can be recycled indefinitely, and this is a very unique feature. So the recyclability of our product itself is something that I'm gonna keep this slide up because it apparently wants to be up. But anyway, the recyclability is something we're very proud of. However, we do also recycle about 7 million tons of steel every year in this country. And I had already mentioned, I'm not sure why my slides are going by themselves, but it's okay. I had already mentioned, it's fine, Dave, that we were a $14 billion, 14 million ton industry. So the idea is a significant amount of recycling going on. I hope you got to see my last slide. There it is. If you're considering a project in Canada And you'd like that project to have the lowest carbon footprint possible. This chart, I think, speaks for itself with respect to why you would forever turn to your domestic steel manufacturer. So not only do we have the benefit of the resources here, and not only do we have the benefit of the strong marketplace, but to get back to Guillermo's point, by using domestic supply into these projects, you have many, many benefits. And one of the ones that I'm showing on the slide is the carbon benefit. A significant opportunity for the Canadian steel industry and for the Canadian economy in lowering our carbon footprint is to utilize Canadian steel in Canadian and North American projects. And I believe this is another reason why we have such strong support, support we're very grateful for in terms of the strategic importance of the steel industry in this country. So with that, I'll leave it for further discussion and dialogue. I look forward to talking to you throughout the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So very, very interesting how we're connecting these dots, develop our Canadian oil and gas resources, lower GHG footprint when using Canadian steel. Now we're going to take it to the broader. How does this fit into Canada's total manufacturing supply chain? And so we have Matthew Wilson, who is Vice President of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. His career has spanned from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association of Canada and spent now over 15 years with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. Matthew.
I think I'm standing between us and a conversation, and I can tell you from doing this many times, the conversation is way more interesting than a speech that anyone can give. I gotta thank Dave, first of all. It was mentioned earlier, but Dave is the chair of our National Board of Directors, so anytime Dave asks us to do anything with CME, of course, we appreciate the opportunity to engage with him. And so Dave, thank you for your leadership, both here today and pulling this together, and with CME and the broader manufacturing community. Rory and the team at the chamber here, thank you for pulling this together today. Mr. Blair, Anthony, and of course, Terry, thank you for your leadership and support of advanced manufacturing in Canada, and in Soo more particularly. It's welcome, tremendous. The announcement this morning was a great example of that. And Dave, to you and the entire team at Tenaris, thank you for your support of CME, and congratulations on today's announcement, which once again demonstrates your commitment to the region and to the future of resource development and manufacturing in Canada. Like other associations here, CME is a member-led and driven organization. For nearly 150 years, our organization has been focused on helping manufacturers grow by creating the right business environment for success and ensuring new opportunities and markets were being opened. Since the start of our organization, and really since the beginning of Canada, that opportunity has been rooted in the development of Canada's natural resources. In fact, the relationship has been a virtuous cycle of prosperity that continues to this day. In 2016, CME did a comprehensive study on the current state and future growth prospects for Canadian manufacturing. Our goal was to double manufacturing output by 2030. This plan was entitled Industry 2030 and noted the critical link between the sectors and called on governments to focus their attention on the opportunities provided for manufacturers through a healthy and thriving natural resource sector. We found through our research that Canada's resource industry has added nearly $60 billion in annual output directly because of the manufacturing sector, which led to nearly 400,000 jobs across the country in this sector, including many here in town, as you've heard today. This was by far the largest relationship between manufacturing and any other sector of the Canadian economy. Why? That's simple, really. It's because Canada has the natural resources, agriculture, forestry, minerals, energy, that the world needs to grow. And the development of those resources at home and abroad for manufacturers who are both a major customer and supplier to the sector. Today, those resources are used by manufacturers to create a wide array of value-added products, as we've heard today. Here in the Soo, for example, steel that is exported to the world and sold to customers just down the street. Likewise, manufacturers create a wide array of technologies, many you saw on the screen earlier, that allow resource extractors the ability to efficiently and effectively develop those resources, like steel pipe, manufactured here by Tenaris. Each step in this process adds value, creates jobs, and drives prosperity for Canadians. Given our abundance of natural resources and our ability to turn those natural resources into high value added products the world needs, it should be no surprise that manufacturing is the largest single business sector in the country. It accounts for nearly 11% of GDP and is by far the largest overall exporter, accounting for 2/3 of Canada's total exports. And while we heard a lot about the natural resource exports from Canada today, many of those natural resource exports are in fact value-added product goods like petroleum and chemicals that are tied directly to the sector. Outside the critically important transportation equipment sector, almost all the largest manufacturing subsectors in terms of production, employment, and output are directly related to natural resources, including food, petrochemicals, forestry, mining, and of course metal fabrication. As a concrete example of the importance of this relationship and how Canada depends on it for our collective prosperity, we do not need to look far back in our history. And I just want to leave this slide up here for you. This is only 4 short years ago, 2014, when oil prices crashed, and so did economic output across Canada and our individual prosperity. As the graphic shows, Canadians lost nearly 5% in GDP per capita almost overnight compared to the United States. Simply put, this means that Canadians are 5% poorer today than our neighbors just a few miles to the south of where we are standing today. This is due only to the drop in economic activity from one sector of the natural resource sector. It shows a relationship between that part of the economy and the rest of us. To regain this prosperity and meet the goals of doubling manufacturing output by 2030, CME strongly believes that governments must turn their focus to natural resource development and the deeply interconnected value supply chains. The world needs and wants our resources, and we can do it much more efficiently and environmentally responsibly than anywhere else in the world. And manufacturers want and need an expanding customer and supply base here at home. Today's announcement of Tenaris was a great start, but much more can and should be done. Thank you again for having me, and David, thank you for your ongoing support of CME.
So thank you very much, Matthew. This is now our opportunity for engagement, and so we'd like to open up to the room. If there are any questions that you would like to ask the panel, any perspective that you'd be interested to hear from them. So perhaps while we're thinking about a question, I'll pose the question that Guillermo asked earlier. How is it that we as Canada can help to develop these resources and these supply chains better, so it's a sense of pride not only for oil and gas in central Canada, but a pride of manufacturing in Western Canada? And maybe I'll start with Shannon as and move from right to left.
So how can we develop the resources in a way that fosters pride? Well, I think part of it is having conversations like this. I think Canada is such a big country that people don't often understand the connection between the different sectors, between industries, and how much they rely on each other for their success. So having more of these types of conversations is critical. And then telling the story of the leadership that results in our steel being the lowest carbon steel in the country, our oil and gas being lower carbon and dropping, so that Canadians also know that they can be proud of that whole supply chain. I think that'll be an important part of how we keep moving.
This is something that MP Anthony Rhoda and I were talking about earlier this morning, and that is that I have a theory that Canada is a nation in spite of its geography. So this is a big country that goes from east to west, but in a very real way, all of our trade links and our associations go north-south. And so to a large measure, Albertans don't understand and appreciate the importance of the manufacturing sector to the oil and gas business. And similarly, people in Ontario don't appreciate the importance of the oil and gas sector to the manufacturing sector. And the same is true in the province of Quebec. So recently, Shannon and I were both at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in Quebec City, and I met with Minister Julien, the Minister of Energy, from the province of Quebec. And here's what he said. This was interesting. I sent him a briefing about 6 weeks before our meeting, and it was clear to me that he'd read my briefing, because when we met at the table in his office, he said, "I want you to know that I understand that 41% of our electricity and our energy in Quebec comes from hydro, and that 56% of it comes from oil and gas. I want you to know that I understand that Bombardier aircraft do not operate on electricity, they operate on aviation fuel. I further want you to know that I understand that 99% of our vehicles are internal combustion engines. And finally, he said, I want you to understand that Quebec supports Énergie Saguenay, which is a large LNG plant in the province of Quebec that will require a 48-inch pipeline to bring natural gas from Western Canada to Quebec for liquefaction in Quebec and then sent out to foreign markets. It was stunning to me because we don't often hear that Quebec supports the energy business, and yet they do. And so it's for that reason that I agree with Shannon. Venues like this where we can talk Albertans to Ontarians and Quebecers, British Columbians and British Columbians with people from Saskatchewan, that is a really, really important point of bringing us together, because it should be, we should have leadership that says, I'm a Canadian first, and I'm an Albertan second. I'm a Canadian first, and I want to know what's good for us, not what's in it for me. And if we can have that kind of leadership, then we will take pride in the kinds of things that we manufacture, we produce, that the world wants. It doesn't matter if it's oil and gas, or if it's agriculture, or high tech, whether it's artificial intelligence or technology. We have a remarkable story to tell in Canada, and we need to tell it together. We need to be a Canadian, we have to have a Canadian identity. We should not be just a collection of provinces that happen to be under one nation's name.
Agree, full agreement on my part. I would add a couple things. I think we need to deepen our collaborations across sectors, so not just our discussion and our dialogue, but our actual working together. I know Gary and I were just chatting about a couple of messages and slides that he's presented or things that I should be incorporating in my messaging and vice versa. And I think, it's a remarkable thing when you can break down silos between industries, between stakeholders, etc. I think the Team Canada approach I was talking about earlier can come to bear here. Another point I'd like to make is the role of ambassadors, which means every single one of our employees, of our communities, we have to build that strong wave of support and momentum, and give people the actual ask employees to be ambassadors on behalf of natural resource development. Give them the opportunity to talk about it, and really help promote the message. We need a lot of people out there talking about this, not just a few of us in terms of getting that message out.
Well, I can't disagree with my panelists here. I think it's great. I'm just going to maybe tell you a personal story to pull us together and show why I agree with them. I grew up about 6 hours to the east of here in a small town called Ingleheart in Northern Ontario. It was a mining and forestry centre town as a kid. It had Adams Mine, for those of you who remember that in the 80s, huge mining operation. But all the iron ore that came out of that went and fed to Fasco's Mills in Hamilton. I knew as a kid the relationship between the natural resource sector and the manufacturing sector was taught to me. My relatives worked in those mines. Uncles of mine were gold miners in Kirkland Lake in a place like Virginia Town. Others worked in the forestry sector and fed a mill in my hometown that shadows over my parents' house. I got the relationship very close and personal, like many of you in this room do. I no longer live in Northern Ontario, but I live in still a resource kind of town in Guelph. And even that, the distance and the relationship between natural resources and manufacturing and kids is really been removed. There is very little understanding of that relationship at all. And I think it's something that needs to change. And I see it in my own kids. I have 2 young kids, both in elementary school, and they don't get it at all. And I do my best to educate them on the relationship. I bring them up to the door to visit family as much as I can so that they see it firsthand. But I think it starts in our schools to make sure that our teachers are teaching the right things about what is happening in our economy and our resource sectors and the value-added manufacturing sector that goes along with it. Because the further and further people get away from resource-based communities, the harder and harder it is for people to remember how important those resources are. So I think starting small in our schools, and organizations like Greenpeace and others do a wonderful job of educating our children on a variety of topics at that age. There's no reason why we can't be doing the same thing, and I think industry needs to step up with great political leadership like we've got here and show the way that can be done.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the floor? Seeing none, I think we want to thank our panelists for coming to Sault Ste. Marie from Calgary, from Toronto, from Ottawa. We appreciate their contributions. I think they've given us all something to think about, and they're always welcome back. And we do have a question from.
I'll ask one. First, I want to thank you all for coming to Sault Ste. Marie. We really appreciate you being here in our community. One thing I get.
By the way, I want to come back during hockey season because the Greyhounds are a great line. Just so you know. So invite me back. Invite me back during hockey season.
I'll do an invitation. Come whenever you want. If you come on a Sunday, I'll bring you my mother's house for dinner.
And he will teach your kids about the power of energy.
Actually, there was a theme that I heard through some of your comments that made me think of Steve and a number of conversations that we've had, and Steve will be speaking soon. But I think a lot of people are rightfully concerned about the environment, and there's tons of talk about the environment. What kind of action that's turning into is a secondary issue, but people are concerned about it, but rightfully it's top of mind. It's something that we all have to be, I think, active on and really focused on because we care about, obviously, the future and the future for our children. But one of the really important points I think you make here, that we're not making broadly, that people aren't talking about, is that Canada is displacing energy, or we can displace energy to a greater degree that is being created and creating more CO2 emissions. So instead of focusing on what is actually happening and saying this is the CO2 emissions of the oil sands or this is the CO2 emissions of our energy sector, but there needs to be, I think, a broader comparison. Creating the energy here is actually reducing it coming from somewhere else. If you take Ferrochrome and you look at what we're doing with the production facility, there's no production facility in North America, but there are operations in North America that use the product. So you mine the product in South Africa, you send it to one of the 50 production facilities in China, they produce it in China under their standards, and then it comes back to North America. So follow the CO2 emissions of that whole route, and then follow the CO2 emissions of taking material out of the ground and putting fire, sending it to a community like Sault Ste. Marie, processing it, and then sending it on a barge over to the US and using it there. It's a much smaller CO2 footprint. And unless people are going to stop using chrome, we're going to have to start introducing these type of pathways, but we're not talking about that. So what can we do to elevate the discussion so that people recognize that Canada producing its energy, its natural resources, with our current standards, which are more significant than the rest of the world, is actually improving the CO2 emissions. But what can we do to get that message out?
Your Worship, I think that this is an excellent point, and part of the answer is in getting more infrastructure done within Canada. So here's a really weird statistic. Now, Shannon might get the numbers more precise than me, but we export roughly 3.3 million barrels of oil a day, and 99.9% of it goes to one marketplace, and that's the United States. Because it's the only market that we really send our oil to, we get paid a discount. In other words, the price that you get for a barrel of Western Canada Select is at a discount compared to an equivalent oil of West Texas Intermediate crude. That discount means that we lose between $50 and $80 million a day that goes directly into the pockets of Americans. At the same time, because we don't have pipelines that go into Eastern Canada, we import between 600,000 and 700,000 barrels of oil a day. But we pay the full market price, and it comes to us from places like the United States, from Algeria, from Venezuela, from Saudi Arabia. I can't think of any country in the world where you would set up your infrastructure in such a way that you sell at a discount and you pay at full price. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So to your point about making sure that we use our own energy here in Canada, it completely makes sense. And you know, and I was telling Eugene about the steel plants that I've seen in China, where there's just no attention paid, and your slide really demonstrates it, to either the environmental footprint or occupational health and safety or labor, you know, and really the Chinese government is paying people to take that steel away. We should be using the stuff right here in Canada.
And it's to build on that point, that's where you ask what can be done. That's where I think government does play a very important role, all levels of government, because we have to make some decisions. And if we just make the decision on price, on the cheapest price of steel, then we'll be continuing to foster the far end of the chart that I showed in terms of carbon footprint as an example. But if we make a choice to build into our procurement for our projects and we show leadership, that we're going to use not just Canadian steel as an example for the sake of Canadian jobs, but because of these broader public policy needs, I think then we're doing ourselves a much bigger service.
Thank you. And thank you very much, panelists. We appreciate your contributions and your inputs. And if anyone is interested in connecting with them, I know they would love to hear your question personally and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call Stephen Llewellyn, Chief Development Officer from Noront.
Well, thank you very much for letting me speak today. I'd first of all like to thank my co-presenter, Mayor Provenzano. You know, he knows the file almost as well as we do, and so I think that's a great testament to the quality of engagement and the enormous interest here in Sault Ste. Marie. So thank you. Little different theme, but you know, different business, but I'd like to talk about, you know, the theme of Made in Canada, which I think is one that is resonates very well today with what we've seen with the Tenaris announcement and what's going on here in Sault Ste. Marie. So I'd like to make a short presentation. We have a much longer version. Usually when we talk like this, it's like for 45 minutes or an hour. So, and I have much larger slide deck, but don't have that today. But still like to make a few points about the Made in Canada opportunity that the Ring of Fire represents. The Ring of Fire, as I'm sure you all know, is a remote region of Northern Ontario and of a very vast province of Ontario. It's about 500 kilometers due north of Thunder Bay. So, and it's 300 kilometers from the nearest road today, and whether that road be in just at Nakina or at Pickle Lake. So it requires a development process that obviously industry is a key part of, but also the two elements of what I think will make and form how our nation works in the future, and that is the role of government and the role of First Nations in development. So, you know, and we pride ourselves on being a leader of that, in that space. That's what we want to do. That's what our core beliefs are. And involve, but we got to make that partnership work. And sometimes that's a bit difficult. And we got to work hard at it so that we get the regional development solutions that we need, and that will involve both the provincial, the federal, and our First Nations governments to do so. We're the key catalysts in the Ring of Fire. Just a couple of points. The Ring of Fire was found in the early, around 2002 with some diamond exploration. The most significant deposit to date was found in 2007, and that was the Eagle's Nest nickel copper deposit. But what I'd like to say is when the exploration was peaking, there was over 40 companies in the Ring of Fire exploring for different minerals. Today there's one. And so I think that's not a great thing in that we need to get some solutions to the access to and get this enormous opportunity, which I'll give you some context on and how good I think it is, going forward. So in this diagram, you're seeing on the bottom the key deposits in the Ring of Fire. The red one is the Eagle's Nest nickel copper PGM deposit. And that's a deposit very similar to the deposits that exist in Sudbury and are currently mined there. And this deposit is a 20 million ton deposit, which will be mined at 1 million tons a year, which is very similar for those who are familiar with the Nickel Rim mine in Sudbury, but the size of that mine. And the economic value produced by this mine will be over $20 billion from that mine alone. The other deposits, the gray ones, are the chrome deposits in the Ring of Fire. And currently there's over 200 million tons of chrome. And the economic value that those deposits will create is over $150 billion. And they're not fully explored yet. You can see on the bottom, they look flat on the bottom. They're not flat. That's just how far the diamond drill holes have gone down. So this resource is an enormous high quality resource to build a Canadian icon business in my mind. I had the pleasure for my 35-year career in mining of working for, what started out as one of the icons of the Canadian mining industry, Falconbridge. And, an outstanding company, started my career in Sudbury, Ontario, where I'm from, and an outstanding business. Unfortunately, that business was purchased by a great company, Xstrata, which is owned by another great company now, Glencore. But a shame that that company fell out of Canadian hands, because it was not just a strong Canadian business, it was a strong international business led by Canadians. And that's a key point, I think, that we miss sometimes. It's the opportunity for Canadians to lead businesses that are world-class businesses, and what that means for our country. And I think this can be one. So you can see on the right at the top, there's our pipeline. Our first project will be the Eagle's Nest nickel copper PGM mine, $700 million mine to build. Takes about 5 years from today to get it done, complete the environmental assessment, a little bit of engineering, and then 3 years of construction. That deposit, though, has to be built in parallel with the development of the infrastructure. So right now, the key thing that we have to get resolved is the path to the Ring of Fire, which is the road network which will connect the communities who are our partners to the Ring of Fire, to the infrastructure that exists in Northern Ontario. That will allow us to build a mine and concentrator and ship nickel copper concentrates to Sudbury for further processing. So and just as an example, the Eagle's Nest deposit, if it goes to Glencore, would represent about 20% of the feed for the Sudbury smelter. So it's for 20 years. So another great opportunity to enhance not just the far north of Ontario, but the other parts of Ontario, including Sudbury. The main thing I want to talk about today, though, is because we're here in Sault Ste. Marie, is what Norront's chromite strategy is. So chromite, for most people, when you talk about what chromite is, they have no idea. They say, what is that? Well, it's an ore that ultimately goes into producing chrome metal. And chrome metal is what goes into every piece of stainless steel that exists in the world. So if you look at that knife and fork set that you have at the table, that would be 1810 stainless steel, which would be 18% chrome, 10% nickel, and the rest is iron. So all chrome in the world, all stainless steel has chrome in it to varying degrees. Now, the stainless steel business in North America represents about 7% of the world's stainless steel business. 60% is in China. But what's an amazing fact about the stainless steel business in North America is there's a lot of high quality stainless that go into very highly value-added projects such as jet engines and things like that, and a little less that goes onto the front of your fridge. But it's, that's mainly made in China. So there's a high quality opportunity for us here in Northern Ontario to be part of the supply chain for that business, because there is no chrome business in North America. In fact, there's only one other small chrome producer in North and South America. So all the chrome that's supplied for the US stainless business comes from primarily either South Africa or Kazakhstan. So it has to make quite the journey to get here. In addition, any facility that's the facilities in Kazakhstan and South Africa are almost primarily powered through coal-fired power plants. So as we've heard, so building a plant here in Sault Ste. Marie with the technology that we want to use, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, and the opportunity to use the hydroelectric power that exists in this region will allow us to have a carbon footprint of about 20% of what the current chrome units that go into stainless steel in North America. So a significant opportunity. In addition, so what we want to do is we want to take about half that market. So right now that market's about 500 to 600,000 tons depending on the year. And we want to produce 280,000 tons of ferrochrome a year here in Sault Ste. Marie, mining 750,000 tons of high quality ore. And the Ring of Fire deposits are the best quality chrome deposits in the world, bar none. Challenges, they're not in a great place. So it's in terms of getting them out. So that's what we got to solve that problem. But 750,000 tons a year to produce half the North American requirements for ferrochrome, and we have 250 million tons already known. So we got a long-term business here. You know, this business is going to operate for a long, long time. In addition to being a long-term business, it's also going to be a first quartile producer in terms of its cost structure. So even mining, driving the chrome ore down to Nakina, railing it from Nakina to Sault Ste. Marie, producing it in Sault Ste. Marie and sending it on a barge to the US customers, we believe we can produce that ferrochrome for about 60 cents a pound, doing all that work. And the price today for ferrochrome in the US market is $1.40. So, you know, you can see that, you know, that business, if you do that math quickly, represents a business that has an annual revenue of over $1 billion Canadian dollars a year, almost 900 million US. So, and that's the first step. What we want to do is then expand that business, and we have a design that will be able to double that business when we believe we have the market and place to send that ferrochrome. So you can see an outstanding multi-billion-dollar business per year for 100 years. So you kind of say, well, why can't we get that done? So I think that's the challenge. And how do we get all the parties together and work together to get this remote region, which I think will be an engine for North American Northern Ontario for the next 10 decades. So I'm going to describe a little bit what that project looks like. So you can see on the bottom what the process is. You go from that's drill core on the left here. That's broken the broken ore there. There's a picture of what the smelter would look like, and there's the final product in that stainless steel. So what we want to do is, in red is the Eagle's Nest nickel copper deposit, and we want to do, the first step is develop our Blackbird mine, which is, you can see, less than a kilometer away from the Eagle's Nest. So what it allows us to do is have a co-development of develop the Eagle's Nest deposit, follow with the Blackbird deposit with a relatively small capital expenditure. And I'm saying relatively small, it's still pretty big. You know, the Eagle's Nest capital expenditure is going to be 700 million Canadian. We estimate that the Blackbird deposit's another 200 million in the Ring of Fire to develop. So almost $1 billion of development in the Ring of Fire. what we'll do is once we're in an expansion, it was on the other slide, we would move to some of the other deposits that I showed, with the largest one being the Black Thor deposit, which was the basis for the plan that Cliffs Natural Resources had, and that's the bigger deposit. But we'll move to that, because it's a little bit more remote, our strategy is to put that into a second stage development. So what do we want to do here? So we want to build this world-class ferrochrome production facility. Now, I'm 35 years in the mining business, and everybody said, well, isn't that a smelter? Well, yes and no. Smelting is a core part of the technology, but it's not all of it. What it is it's a smelter, refinery, and it's a value-added manufacturing plant. So I think we have to start to think about a facility like this more like a manufacturing facility, because that's what it's going to look like. And it's going to look like a manufacturing facility from the type of workforce that's required. And of course, that's why Sault Ste. Marie is an ideal place for it, because you have a history of this kind of facility and the skill set necessary to make it work. We're working with a Canadian engineering company on this design, Hatch Engineering out of Oakville. So they're our partners on this in the design point of view. And we want to work closely with the city of Sault Ste. Marie and very closely with the First Nation communities here at Batchewana and Garden River. Just a little footnote there. My mom's she's passed away now, but she's from Sault Ste. Marie, and my grandfather's from the Garden River Reserve. So that's just a little tidbit of a relationship I have here at Sault Ste. Marie. So this will be a state-of-the-art plant. It'll be based on direct current furnace technology, and it would have two 65 megawatt direct two lines, and those will be filled by what's called a rotary kiln. A rotary kiln basically preheats the material to put it in the furnace to melt. One of the things that this plant needs is it has a very significant power footprint. The ultimate plant will have a connected load of 325 megawatts. And the first stage would be a little more than half of that, just close to 200, because the motive power that you need to run the plant, you can't reduce by 50%. So a very significant part of the power economy, it'll be, when it's built, it'll be the largest single user of power in Ontario. And we hope we can do that here in Sault Ste. Marie by harnessing what it is, power that kind of goes to waste right now. There's a lot of hydropower in Northern Ontario that's not utilized for any economic value because of distribution problems. Here's a way to turn it into $1 billion a year of economic activity. So I think a great opportunity. And so that's kind of why we're here in Sault Ste. Marie. We thought it was the best place. We looked at 4 communities in Northern Ontario, including Timmins, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay. And I must say, all the communities did an outstanding job in putting trying to make their community the community of choice. But when it came down to it, we thought that the equation of Great Lakes access for the products, the location of Sault Ste. Marie and its history as an industrial community, it ticked all the boxes the best and became our choice. So we're on a long journey to build the Ring of Fire and build this plant here and build the first North American ferrochrome producer. Give you a little bit of a sense on what time that looks like. That's just an example of that's in a picture of the Algoma property where we're planning to build the plant, and in gray at the top is this location of the plant. So it's a significant facility, but that's more than a large enough piece of property you can see to get that plant built. Timing, long journey. There hasn't been a hot metal plant, mining plant, smelter, permitted in Canada since the 1970s. Kidd Creek was the last one done. So this is a very significant thing to get done, and we want to do it the right way. This is an enormous piece of work in terms of doing the engineering work that needs to be done, making sure we have the right power strategy to supply and get the right power costs, which I'm sure everyone knows is a challenge here in Ontario right now, and we have to address. and then go through the process to finish the design and to do the environmental assessment work. This is at least a $50 million journey just to do this, and then this facility in our current estimate is about $1.2 billion to build. So this is a very significant, when it's built, this facility, it'll between 1,000 and 1,500 jobs during the 3-year construction process, and 300 to 400 jobs operating in the first stage and over 500 jobs in the second stage. And when I say jobs, these are extremely well-paying jobs. So the average job that's created in Canada today is about $52,000. In our economic assessment for this plant, the average job per year in this facility is $108,000 a year. So, so it's a 2-for-1 job, right? So when you say there's 300 jobs, it's more equivalent to 600 plus the supply chain jobs that you get on top of it. So this will be a world-class facility. It'll be here for well over 100 years, and I think it's gonna and will be the foundation for what I hope is the next major Canadian mining company. And so that's the end of my presentation today. Thank you.
I really want to thank Your Worship for obviously having us here, and this is a great panel that you guys have. The panels these are from across Canada and experts in your field. So the discussion we've had here in Sault Ste. Marie, I think it's really timely as to what's going on, certainly not only in Canada but around the world. I really want to thank as well as my colleague Terry Sheehan, who's a great advocate for the Soo, as you can imagine, certainly when it comes to the steel industry. And talk about clean steel. That's not something that we talk about enough. Certainly Canadian steel, how clean it is, how it is an advantage that we have. Canada, as I've noticed in my role, has tons of advantages. Certainly when it comes to the energy industry, we are very fortunate. In Ontario, we have hydro, we have nuclear. Quebec, we have hydro. Certainly out west, we have oil and gas. When we talk about the oil and gas sector and where we see it going, there is a lot of opportunities, and that's what we heard from some of the panelists here today. Certainly, where we look around the world, they are looking at Canada as a source, a sustainable source for the energy need that they have. So I was just at the G20 meeting. I was representing Canada at the Environment and Energy Ministers meeting. It's the first time that we've had combined both. And wearing the Canadian hat was quite an honor. But at the same time, the conversations I was having with Japan, having with Korea, Singapore, they were all interested in the LNG, our natural gas sector. They were really thinking, well, they were asking us, how do we need to have access to more gas? That's why last year, we're quite proud that we had approved a $40 billion investment. That is $40 billion. That was the largest private sector investment in Canada. So it's building the pipeline in British Columbia, a 670-kilometer pipeline. So projects can be built in Canada. That was it as well. We were quite pleased when we announced Trans Mountain Pipeline being approved as well. No, it was a big challenge, but certainly, as we said, right now, our oil sector, our oil exports are going to one place. 99% of it is going to one client. We have one customer, you guys have a lot of business people in the room, they get to dictate what the price is. We need to change that, and that's why, moving forward, that's why we decided that Trans Mountain was in the best Canadian interest to move forward with it. So now we need to see it through. There are challenges, but we need to do it systematically and correctly, and we're obviously following judgments from the courts and following the law. That is something that we are endeavoring to make sure that happens. When it comes to Northern Ontario, I'm very proud and certainly very bullish. We've heard from what's going on in the Ring of Fire. There's amazing opportunities, and we all get to benefit from this. The Soo, Sudbury, North Bay will get their piece, Timmins will get their piece. Why? Because of the supply chain we talked about. You know what? We cannot do it only one community alone. This is such a massive project that we will all benefit from this. As we've all benefited certainly when it comes just to mines in Sudbury. People don't know this, but there are actually 4 new mines that will be built in the next 5 years in Sudbury alone. In the Sudbury area. 4 new mines. $5 billion will be invested in the area. So there's tons of opportunities. And where we see some of the challenges, and when we talk about, with respect to human resources, getting the workers to do that job. Certainly getting workers that will go up to the Ring of Fire. just be workers in the area, certainly with the ProMed facility here. There'll be a new trades, new people coming in just to be able to meet that demand, which is a great problem to have. We've been through cyclical times, certainly in the Soo, like in Sudbury, like in Kapuskasing, where I'm from. But at the same time, bringing in more human resources to supply those jobs, and certainly we need to all to work towards as well. Certainly, education is very important. Certainly, supplying it through our colleges and university. Then we got to talk about immigration, skilled immigrants coming in, and the Soo and Sudbury are no strangers to that. We were built basically on the back of immigrants. That's how we were made, and that's how we remain as well. I just see, you know what? There's a lot of discussions out there as to where the economy is going, and there's a lot of, certainly we're very optimistic. 1 million jobs, as we said, was created in Canada. People in this room obviously have a hand in that. We need to continue down that road. And there are challenges when there are opportunities, we need to invest in those opportunities. That's why the announcement today that you guys made with Tenaris, I really want to congratulate. This is a great news announcement. And again, that discussion, you know what, in Canada we don't hear enough about how the West ties into the East and certainly Central into Ontario. How we work together, how that supply chain, just not in one province, but it goes across provinces. And the announcement today talks about that. And this week as well, maybe not too far down Highway 17, Domtar also received $28 million from the federal government to reinvest in their mill, because we want to make sure we keep those investments in Canada. We want to make sure those companies want to invest in Canada, not only to create the jobs, but to make sure that the supply chain remains. We all get to benefit from that. And that's something I really want to bring to the Soo, is that by working together in Northern Ontario, these opportunities for our families, for our friends, and certainly for our next generation are key. So I just want to leave you up on that note, saying there's a lot of great things going on. There's a lot of potential. And by working together, by communicating together, certainly in our area, the Soo, Sudbury, Timmins, North Bay, but also across the country, there are amazing things that we can do. In my travels, in my role, the world is looking at Canada. They are looking at us to be able to supply them some of these resources. So this is tremendous opportunities, and I really thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, congratulations, Tenaris, for your growth, and Noront, fantastic news. Thank you for being here. In closing, I'd like to call Dawn up to give us some closing remarks.
I know you're all saying, damn, hope he makes it quick, so I will, okay. First of all, I want to say thank you to the panel. I'm deviating from what I was told I could say, but if I could say to Shannon and Gary and Catherine and Matthew, thank you very much. I was very fortunate back in April, May to be at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce annual general meeting and heard a lot of the same delivery and appreciate, and I'm so glad that it can be shared here today. And I thank Tenaris for everything they've done, for their expansion, for what you've done in leading in this community and continue to lead. It's appreciated very, very greatly. To our members of parliament and our city members of council, mayor, and minister, Terry, my friend, and Anthony, thank you for your help. I wanted to talk just a bit and say, Sault Ste. Marie is not a resource, is a resource city, but it's also a resource champion. In partnership with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we will be launching Canada's Resource Champions Resources of the Future, launching in September. Canada's Resources of the Future campaign has the following objectives: to inform and engage Canadians about the critical role of our resource sector in driving innovations, enabling and being part of a cleaner energy future and creating a prosperous economy for all. To engage Canadians to show their pride and support to Canada's resource sector through a simple, easy to execute call to action. To broaden Canadians' knowledge of the resource sector to include forestry, mining, minerals, agriculture, and energy. This project strategy will lever the power of the Chamber of Commerce network, reaching out to our 450 chambers of commerce and boards of trade to circulate these stories and reach our national audience. Look for the launch in September. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now wrapping up this agenda. I thank you so much for being here. Again, I want to thank Greg, for the MC. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Dave, who spoke very graciously at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and led the discussions today. Thank you very much. And again, for everybody here, for being in business in Sault Ste. Marie and for being Canadian. Thank you all. Have a great time. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you.